Hello, everyone. For those of you who don't know me, my name is Lindsey and I go to Longwood University, and I'm a member of Alpha Delta Pi sorority. People would consider me to be very outgoing and bubbly. This is true. However, I've had to deal with some very difficult situations in my lifetime. This is my story. In 1983, my parents were blessed with their first child, my one and only annoying brother, Nathan. When individuals become parents, the most important thing that they can hear from the doctor is your child is perfect and healthy. This was not the case with my brother. My parents quickly learned that my brother had an intestinal cancer called Hirschsprung's disease. This caused many issues for my brother and kept him in and out of the hospital for the first few years of his life. Luckily, my brother was able to recover from this cancer. However, this scared my parents and made them question if they should have any more children because of the troubles they faced with him. Fortunately enough for me, my mom was able to convince my dad that if she didn't have a little girl to dress up in bows and dresses, that she would not be a happy camper. My dad agreed, and 7 years and 10 months after my brother was born, I came into the world. Luckily for me and for my parents, the doctor was able to give them news they had wanted to hear from my brother. Your child is perfect and healthy. I had an extremely happy childhood. I was constantly spending time with family and friends. One particular family member that I loved spending time with was my dad's sister, my Aunt Charlotte. She was like a second mother to me. When she was just 20 years old, she was diagnosed with cancer. She was able to fight the cancer that was taking over her ovaries. However, it stopped her the ability to have kids. She was cancer-free for 20 years when she found out that she had cancer yet again. I was in the 7th grade and was not pleased to find out that someone I cared for so much had to go through such a terrible time. Not too long after, my aunt lost her battle to ovarian cancer. This was hard for me because it was the first death that I had to experience so close to my heart. Fast forward to high school, graduation was quickly approaching, and I was dying to go away on a fun trip. My mom decided we could do a girls' trip and that she would contact a good friend of hers that was a travel agent. The trip we decided on was Cancun, Mexico. I was very excited for this because I had never been out of the country. But I can't lie, I was a little fearful to spend an entire week with just my mom because we were so alike that we would constantly bump heads. We had a great time on the trip with snorkeling, hanging by the pool, and all-inclusive food all week. But if any of you know Mexico, it's just a bit hot in the middle of July. So my mom got what she thought was sun poisoning on her chest. When we got home from the trip, my mom's chest was still very irritated, so she decided to go to the doctor to get it checked out. The doctor told her that he didn't like the way that it looked and that he wanted her to go to the hospital to have it checked out further. My dad met my mom at the hospital, and later they called me asking that I come too. I wasn't sure why it was so important that I came, so I began to get really worried on the way there. When I got there, my parents had to break the news to me that my mom had been diagnosed with leukemia. I was in complete and total shock. I couldn't believe that this was happening. I acted calm, at the hospital, but as soon as I got in the car, I burst into tears and cried all the way to my best friend Lauren's house. When I got to Lauren's, I broke the news to her. She was in complete shock too, because this is my mom we were talking about, which is like a second mom to her since we had been best friends since the 3rd grade. She comforted me and told me everything would be okay, but the worrier in me wasn't so sure. Somehow, I was able to collect myself and stay calm while still preparing to move into Longwood for my first year of college just 1 month later. My mom was still in the hospital when I moved into college in August of 2010, so it was just my dad and I. I was completely thrilled that he was there to help me, but at the same time, a mom's opinion on how to set up your first college dorm room would have been more appropriate. My mom was able to leave the hospital about a month into me being away at school and was finally able to come visit. I was thrilled to see her, but I was not so thrilled about the stares she was getting from people for wearing a mask in the dorm to avoid catching anything from anyone else. It was like people were looking at her like she had issues, but all she was trying to do was protect herself and her health. Mom's blood count was very low, so it was suggested by her doctor that she have a bone marrow transplant done to rid her body and the blood of her cancer. We all tried to be donors for my mom, but none of us seemed to be matches. Luckily enough, in December of freshman year, a donor from California was found. My mom was scheduled to have the procedure done in January. We were all nervous about the procedure because we knew the risks were high for her not to recover to her fullest because of the toll it would take on her body. Luckily enough, the procedure went well and my mom recovered just fine, but it was important we paid attention to her health because of the threat of anyone with any type of illness being around her, just to be safe for the first few months after the procedure. The end of my freshman year finally had come, and I was back at home with my mom and dad for the summer. Everything with Mom seemed to be going well, so we were extremely hopeful that things would be cleared up and a free from cancer announcement would soon be following. However, one day, things took a turn for the worse. My mom and dad decided to go out of town to our place on the river for the weekend, since my mom had been feeling better. It wasn't until they were there, having a good time, that my mom started to not feel so great. This worried my dad, and he immediately got Mom in the car and started to make the hour-and-a-half drive back home. They got my mom to MCV Cancer Center, and the doctors began to run tests. My dad called me to let me know what was going on, but he didn't want to worry me, so he told me, there's no need to come here today. We'll go see your mom tomorrow. A couple more days went by, and I was extremely terrified to step foot into the hospital. I don't know about y'all, but hospitals are not my favorite place to be. I really feared the idea of being there. However, I knew it was where I should be with my mom. My two friends, Ashley and Brittany, were able to convince me that I needed to go see my mom before it was possibly too late. When I got there, we all went in, and Mom was already in a state of mind where she couldn't talk, and she wasn't really awake either. My friends decided to give us some alone time before we left the hospital. I just sat there in the hospital room holding my mom's hand, telling her I was sorry that she had to go through this, and I wished she would recover and be okay. I told her I loved her, kissed her, and left. My one friend, Brittany, came back home with me, and we decided to just watch TV. But all I could think about was my dad, grandma, and my mom's brothers and my aunts at the hospital with her. At around 9 p.m. on Tuesday, July 20th, 2010, my dad called from the hospital to let me know my mom had passed away. I responded calmly on the phone, but on the inside I was freaking out. I couldn't believe that I had to go through this. It wasn't fair. I didn't deserve it. So on and so on. That weekend, we had the funeral for my mom. It was hard to have so many people coming up to you telling you how sorry they were for you, when all I wanted to do was leave because I was so mad. My dad and brother felt the same way because we all took it pretty hard. However, we thought my dad was taking it the hardest. He kept having trouble eating, and we just thought he didn't have an appetite because of everything that had just happened with my mom. But it kept getting worse. In August of 2010, I came back to Longwood for my sophomore year, with just my dad to move me in again. It became obvious to me and to everyone else around that my dad was losing some weight, so I told him, "You should really go to the doctor to make sure everything's okay." He agreed. The doctors agreed that something wasn't right, and it wasn't until about October of 2010 that we found out that my dad had esophageal cancer, which occurs in your esophagus, which is a long, narrow tube that runs from your throat to your stomach, which explained his lack of appetite. When I saw my dad in the beginning of November, he had become tiny. This was weird to me because my dad was not a small man. When Christmas break came around, my dad had become so sick that he needed someone at the house to take care of him at all times. My aunts, uncles, and close family friends all volunteered to do so, since my brother was out of state working and I was away at school. On Christmas Day, I went and saw my family by myself because my dad was too sick to come with me. This was extremely hard for me because I was without my mom and dad on Christmas for the first time ever. After I went back to school to finish up my sophomore year, my dad's condition only worsened, so my family made the decision to hire an in-home nurse to care for my dad. When I came back home from summer break, my aunt thought it would be best if I stayed at my best friend Lauren's house because my dad's condition was nowhere near good. On Mother's Day, 1 week after I returned home from school, everyone was getting ready for church at Lauren's. I decided I would rather go spend some time with my dad that morning because it was the first Mother's Day without my mom and I really just wanted to be with him. He was sleeping the whole time I was there, but I just sat with him. After a few hours, I went back to Lauren's house. Within 30 minutes of being home, Lauren's mom walked in the door and said, "Lindsey, I'm so sorry, but your dad just passed away." Lauren and her sister came in behind, crying, and that's when I knew it was true. I was in complete and total shock. I couldn't say or do anything. I just sat down on the floor and stared at the wall. I've never been more mad than I was in that moment. My one parent that I had left, my perfect dad, had to be taken away from me on my first Mother's Day without my mom. We had the funeral a week later, and I continued to be just as mad, if not more, at this because I couldn't believe I had to go through this at just 20 years old. Now I know you're all thinking there is going to be a bright light at the end of the story where everything turns out great, but that's not reality. This is how my life has been, and I can honestly sit back and say that I'm okay. I'm standing here alive with 1 week left before I graduate with the best support system on the planet. I can't say I'll be able to have my mom taking pictures of me as I walk across the graduation stage or my dad to walk me down the aisle, but I have the best family, friends, and sisters that a girl could ask for. So what I'm asking of you is to be that friend to someone when they have nowhere else to go. To be that house that they can call home when they don't have anywhere to stay on breaks. To be those sisters that would drop anything to see a smile on your face. Cancer doesn't always have a light at the end of the tunnel for everyone, but if you can be that light for someone, then you're doing something to benefit this amazing cause. Thank you.